You know, when I woke up this morning on the transport ship heading to the Galactic Council chambers, I really thought the worst thing that could happen to me today was spilling coffee on my one good diplomatic suit. Boy, was I wrong. Let me back up. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm what you might generously call Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. How did I get this job? Well, that's a funny story. See, there was supposed to be this whole selection process, interviews, background checks, the works. But apparently someone in the Earth Defense Bureau filed the paperwork wrong, and instead of getting Ambassador Jake Morrison, the decorated xenobiologist with 3 PhDs, they got me. Jake Morrison. I sell insurance. Well, sold insurance. Past tense, because now I'm apparently humanity's diplomatic representative to an entire galaxy of alien civilizations. The Galactic Council chambers are exactly what you'd expect if someone told an architect to design a building that screams we take ourselves very seriously. Picture a massive circular amphitheater carved out of what looks like black marble, with floating platforms for each species delegation. The whole place hums with some kind of energy field that translates languages in real time, which is convenient because I barely passed high school Spanish. Sitting across from me are 3 aliens who look like they stepped out of a fever dream designed by someone who watched way too many nature documentaries. First up is Commander Vextar, representing the Catherian Empire. Imagine a rhinoceros beetle, but if that beetle hit the gym religiously for about 10 years and developed a serious case of anger management issues. His shell gleams like polished obsidian, and he's got these massive horns that he keeps pointing at me in what I can only assume is either a threat display or really poor table manners. Next to him sits high economist Krill of the Mollusk Trade Federation. Now, I've seen some things in my day, but nothing quite prepared me for a 6-foot-tall slug wearing what appears to be a business suit made of crystallized slime. Every time Krill speaks, little bubbles form around his mouth, and I'm trying really hard not to think about what that implies about his respiratory system. And finally, there's Minister Zephon from the Avian Confluence. Picture a crane that decided to go to law school and never got over it. Zephon's got these impossibly long, elegant neck feathers that seem to flow in a non-existent breeze, and eyes that look like they've seen the rise and fall of civilizations, which, according to his file, they literally have. Guy's supposedly over 2,000 years old. They're all staring at me with this expectant look, like I'm about to pull a rabbit out of a hat or explain the meaning of life. The problem is, I have absolutely no idea what they want from me. So Commander Vextar rumbles, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer, Human Morrison. We have heard much about your species. The legends that have spread throughout the Outer Rim sectors are quite remarkable. Legends? What legends? The most remarkable thing humanity has done lately is figure out how to make reality TV shows even more mindless than they already were. Yes, I say, trying to sound diplomatic and confident instead of confused and slightly nauseous from the weird gravity in this place. We humans are quite proud of our achievements. My economist Krill's eye stalks swivel toward me with interest. Indeed. We are most eager to witness the demonstration of your species' unique capability. The trait that has made you worthy of council consideration. Oh, great. There's supposed to be a demonstration. You have a trait I apparently possess but have never heard of. This is like showing up to a test you didn't know you were taking. Except instead of failing algebra, I might accidentally start an interspecies war. The demonstration, I repeat slowly, buying time. Right, of course. The demonstration of our very special human trait. Minister Zephon's ancient eyes narrow. You do know what we speak of, do you not, Ambassador Morrison? I give them my best confident smile, the same one I used to use when insurance customers asked me about policy details I'd forgotten to read. Absolutely. I was just making sure you all knew what we were talking about. The 3 aliens exchange glances. It's the kind of look that says they're starting to suspect that Earth might have sent them an idiot instead of a diplomat. Which, to be fair, is exactly what happened. Excellent, Commander Vextar says, leaning forward on his platform. Then you are prepared to show us the legendary human ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle through sheer determination and innovative thinking? I blink. The what now? Or perhaps high economist Krill interjects, bubbles forming excitedly around his mouth, that you will demonstrate the fabled human capacity for impossible mathematical calculations and strategic planning that we have heard so much about? Wait, are they talking about the same species that once started a war because someone threw tea into a harbor? The same species that regularly gets into arguments about whether a hot dog is a sandwich? Actually, Minister Zephon says, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, that I am most curious about the reports of human emotional resilience and their ability to find hope in the darkest circumstances. But, okay, they're definitely talking about some other humans. Maybe there's a parallel universe where humanity actually has its act together, and these aliens got their wires crossed. Right, I say, standing up and trying to look like I have any idea what I'm doing. All of those things. Very human traits indeed. I rack my brain for anything that might count as a legendary human ability. We're pretty good at making excuses. We've turned procrastination into an art form. We can find something to complain about in literally any situation. Perhaps I could start with our technological innovations. I suggest pulling out my phone. This device can access virtually all human knowledge and communication networks. Commander Vextar examines the phone with about as much interest as you'd show a particularly boring rock. Fascinating. Primitive quantum entanglement communication with basic data storage. We developed similar devices approximately 3,000 years ago. Well, that's embarrassing. Okay, how about our physical capabilities? I do a few jumping jacks. Humans are incredibly versatile in terms of movement and adaptability. High economist Krill makes a sound that might be laughter but could also be digestive distress. Ambassador Morrison, our species can compress our bodies to 1/10 normal size and survive in vacuum for 6 months. Your jumping is quite charming, though. This is going great. Just fantastic. Intelligence, then, I say desperately. Humans are known for our problem-solving abilities and creative thinking. I start rattling off some basic math, a few historical facts, maybe a joke or two. The aliens listen politely, but I can see their enthusiasm dying faster than my motivation to go to the gym every January. Minister Zephon clears his throat with a sound like wind through ancient trees. Ambassador Morrison, these are all admirable traits, but they are quite common throughout the galaxy. Every species represented in this council possesses these abilities to some degree. Common? I sputter. But we invented democracy, and the internet, and pizza. The Terran Collective has had representative government for 12 millennia, Commander Vextar says flatly. The Hive network predates your internet by several thousand years. And pizza is just bread with toppings, which every agricultural species discovers within decades of developing cuisine. I slump back into my chair. This is a disaster. Earth spent the last 50 years preparing for first contact, building up humanity's image as this amazing, unique species worthy of joining the galactic community. And it turns out we're basically the cosmic equivalent of that kid who shows up to school picture day wearing the same shirt as 3 other kids. Perhaps. Minister Zephon says gently, there has been some misunderstanding. The reports we received indicated that humans possess a trait so unique and powerful that entire civilizations have fallen before it. Wars have been won, empires toppled, entire political structures revolutionized by this single human characteristic. I stare at him. Are you sure you have the right species? We're talking about the same humans who once had a war that started because someone got shot while looking at a sandwich, right? The 3 aliens exchange those looks again. This time it's the kind of look that says they're starting to think Earth might have pranked them. Ambassador Morrison, Commander Vextar says slowly, are you certain you are qualified to represent your species in these proceedings? And that's when something inside me snaps. Not in a dramatic movie moment kind of way. More like when you're trying to open a jar of pickles and the lid finally gives way. Except instead of pickles, it's every petty annoyance I've ever experienced in my entire life. Qualified? I say, and I can hear my voice getting that edge it gets when customer service puts me on hold for 45 minutes. You want to know if I'm qualified? Listen here, Commander Beetle for brains, I say, standing up and pointing a finger at Vextar. I might not be the ambassador you were expecting, but I'm the ambassador you got. And you know what? I'm getting real tired of this condescending attitude from a species that apparently thinks shiny shell polish makes up for basic social skills. The energy in the room shifts. It's like that moment at a family dinner when someone brings up politics and everyone realizes the evening is about to go sideways. Commander Vextar rears back, his horns gleaming menacingly. How dare you speak to a representative of the Catherian Empire with such disrespect? Oh, I'm sorry, I say, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Did I hurt the feelings of the mighty warrior race? The same warrior race that, according to your own introduction, hasn't actually won a war in over 2 centuries because you're too busy arguing about military protocol to actually fight anyone? Vextar's shell darkens to an almost purple black. That is classified military information. How could you possibly know about our strategic difficulties? Because you literally just told us about your glorious military tradition for 20 minutes, and the only specific victories you mentioned were all from before the current millennium. Basic math, big guy. Economist Krill's eye stalks swivel between us nervously. Perhaps we should maintain diplomatic decorum and... Oh, don't even start. Slime time, I interrupt, rounding on him. You want to talk about maintaining decorum? Your entire economic system is based on convincing other species to pay premium prices for what amounts to fancy coffee beans. I saw your trade reports. 3/4 of the Mollusk Federation's GDP comes from selling artisanal caffeinated beverages to civilizations that are too polite to tell you they can grow the same beans in their own backyards for a fraction of the cost. Krill's bubbling intensifies dramatically. The Mollusk Federation provides essential services to developing civilizations. Our expertise in agricultural optimization and cultural exchange is invaluable. Cultural exchange? You mean the part where you convince primitive species that drinking bitter water makes them sophisticated, then charge them through the nose for the privilege? That's not cultural exchange. That's the galaxy's most successful pyramid scheme with a coffee theme. Minister Zephon draws himself up to his full, impressive height. Young human, you would do well to show respect to your elders. I have observed the rise and fall of civilizations across millennia, and apparently learned nothing from any of them. I snap. You've been alive for 2,000 years, and the best wisdom you can offer is a bunch of bureaucratic procedures that take 6 months to approve a simple trade agreement. Your entire government is basically one giant complaint about how things were better in the old days. I've seen your council records. Zephon. Half your legislative sessions are just you talking about how young species today don't understand proper etiquette. The ancient bird's feathers ruffle in what I can only assume is indignation. Proper protocol is the foundation of civilized society. Proper protocol is what happens when you're too scared to make actual decisions, so you hide behind rules and procedures. You've turned being old into a substitute for being useful. The silence that follows is the kind of silence you get when someone has just said something so brutally honest that everyone needs a moment to process it. It's like verbal whiplash. Commander Vextar is the first to recover. This is outrageous. I demand satisfaction for these insults to my honor. Your honor? I laugh, and it's not a nice laugh. What honor? You've been sitting here for the last hour trying to intimidate me with your scary bug routine. But the second someone points out that your empire is all show and no substance, that you want to challenge them to a duel, that's not honor, that's compensation. How dare you? And you. I turn back to Krill. Stop acting like you're some kind of injured innocent. You came into this meeting planning to figure out how to exploit whatever special human trait I demonstrated. I saw you taking notes on your little slime tablet. You were already calculating profit margins before I even opened my mouth. Economist Krill's eye stalks droop. That is standard economic assessment protocol. That is you being an ambulance-chasing lawyer with a gastropod theme. I spin around to face Minister Zephon again. And you, ancient wisdom bird, you've been sitting there this whole time acting like you're some kind of sage when really you're just a 2,000-year-old bureaucrat who peaked in middle management and never got over it. Something interesting happens then. Instead of getting more offended, All three aliens go very quiet. They're looking at me with a mixture of shock, horror, and what might actually be respect. Fascinating, Minister Zephon murmurs. Absolutely fascinating. What's fascinating? I demand, still riding the wave of righteous indignation. The fact that someone finally called you out on your pretentious nonsense? No, Commander Vextar says slowly. The fact that you just did in 5 minutes what our enemies have been trying to accomplish for centuries. I blink. What are you talking about? High Economist Krill's bubbling has taken on an almost excited quality. Ambassador Morrison, do you realize what you have just demonstrated? Yeah, I say, suddenly feeling a bit deflated. I demonstrated that humans are petty and mean when they get annoyed. Precisely, all three aliens say in unison. Wait, hold on, I say, sinking back into my chair. You're telling me that being a sarcastic jerk is humanity's legendary special ability? Minister Zephon leans forward, his ancient eyes gleaming with something that looks suspiciously like excitement. Not merely sarcasm, Ambassador Morrison. What you have just displayed is the ability to cut through pretense, identify weakness, and attack it with surgical precision while maintaining complete emotional investment in proving your point. That's just called being petty. Exactly. Commander Vextar exclaims, and I'm starting to think getting him excited might have been a mistake. Do you understand what you have done? In the span of minutes, you have identified the core insecurities and fundamental flaws of 3 different galactic civilizations and used them as weapons. And High Economist Krill adds, bubbles forming rapidly, you did so not out of malice or strategic planning, but because you were personally annoyed. The attack was not calculated, it was emotional, instinctive, and utterly devastating. I stare at them. Are you telling me that's a rare trait? Rare? Minister Zephon laughs, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Ambassador Morrison, most species evolve past petty personal attacks once they develop interstellar travel. Civilized beings learn to suppress emotional responses in favor of logical discourse. But humans, Commander Vextar continues. Humans apparently retained the ability to be personally offended by abstract concepts and respond with targeted character assassination. It is simultaneously primitive and terrifying. Terrifying? Oh yes, Krill says, his eye stalks practically vibrating with excitement. Consider what you accomplished. You destabilized our confidence, exposed our greatest fears, and turned our own pride against us. And you did it by accident, simply because you were irritated. I think about this for a moment. So you're saying that spite is humanity's secret weapon? Not spite, Minister Zephon corrects. Spite implies a desire for revenge. What you demonstrated was something far more dangerous. The ability to hold a grudge against strangers based purely on principle, and then weaponize that grudge through creative insults. That's still just spite. No, Commander Vextar says firmly. Spite is temporary. What you possess is persistent, renewable pettiness. Watch. He turns to Minister Zephon. Ancient One, perhaps you could share with Ambassador Morrison your recent efficiency ratings for the Council's administrative procedures? Zephon's feathers immediately ruffle. Those ratings are based on outdated metrics that fail to account for the complexity of interspecies diplomatic protocol. There it is, I say, pointing it at him. You just proved my point. You spent 2 sentences making excuses instead of just admitting your bureaucracy is slow. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You hide behind complexity when really you just can't make decisions efficiently. The decision-making process requires careful consideration of all cultural variables. No, it requires you to stop being scared of making mistakes and just pick an option. You've been alive for 2,000 years and you still second-guess yourself like a teenager asking someone to prom. Minister Zephon draws himself up indignantly. I do not second-guess myself. You literally just second-guessed your response to my accusation of second-guessing by explaining why you don't second-guess things. That's like saying I never repeat myself twice. High Economist Krill starts bubbling with what I now recognize as laughter. Remarkable. You have managed to frustrate a being with 2 millennia of diplomatic experience into contradiction within seconds. And you, I say, turning to Krill, you're laughing, but your whole economic model is basically a galaxy-wide scam. How is that better? Our trade practices are entirely legitimate. Legitimate doesn't mean ethical. You're like a used car salesman who specializes in selling rust buckets to civilizations that just invented the wheel. Technically legal, morally questionable, and definitely taking advantage of your customers' inexperience. Krill's bubbling stops abruptly. That is a gross oversimplification of our economic development initiatives. Economic development initiatives? Just call it what it is. You found a bunch of species that didn't know any better and convinced them to overpay for coffee. It's the galactic equivalent of selling bottled water to people who live next to a lake. Commander Vextar is watching this exchange with fascination. Extraordinary. You have now insulted all three of our civilizations twice, each time with increasing specificity and accuracy. Yeah, well, you make it easy, I say. And don't think you're off the hook. Commander compensation issues. Your entire military philosophy is based on looking scary enough that nobody wants to fight you, which works great until someone calls your bluff. The Kytherian Empire has never backed down from a challenge. Because nobody's challenged you recently. You've spent so much time polishing your armor and practicing your threatening poses that you forgot how to actually fight. You're like a bodybuilder who's all show muscles and no functional strength. Our military capabilities are beyond question. Are they, though? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your military capabilities are mostly limited to intimidating species that are impressed by shiny beetles. What happens when you run into someone who's not afraid of bugs? The silence that follows is different from the previous ones. This time it's the kind of silence that happens when someone has just asked a question that nobody wants to answer. Finally, Minister Zephon speaks. This is precisely what we were told to expect from humans. What do you mean? The reports we received described a species capable of reducing entire diplomatic negotiations to personal arguments, of turning rational discourse into emotional warfare, and of doing so with such conviction that their targets begin to doubt their own fundamental assumptions about themselves. I blink. That sounds terrible. It is, Commander Vextar says admiringly. It is absolutely terrible. And completely effective. Okay, wait, I say, holding up my hands. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that humanity's reputation across the galaxy is based on our ability to be petty and hold grudges? Not just hold grudges, High Economist Krill corrects, his bubbling taking on an almost reverent tone. To nurture grudges. To feed them and help them grow into elaborate, creative revenge fantasies that you then act upon with disturbing persistence. I don't do that. Ambassador Morrison, Minister Zephon says gently, you have spent the last 20 minutes systematically dismantling everything we said we were proud of. Not because it served any strategic purpose, but because we implied you might not be qualified for your job. I think about this. That's different. How? Because you were being condescending. And that offended you personally. Well, yeah. Even though you had never met us before today and have no personal investment in our opinions of your qualifications. I open my mouth to argue, then close it, then open it again. That's a good point. This is what makes humans unique, Commander Vextar explains. Most species, when faced with criticism from strangers, either ignore it or respond with logical counterarguments. Humans take it personally and respond with targeted character assassination. But that's not really a superpower, I protest. That's just being petty and thin-skinned. Is it, though? Minister Zephon asks, consider your species' history. What drove humans to develop space travel? I think about it. Well, originally it was the Cold War. Two superpowers trying to prove who was better. Spite-driven competition. And democracy? We didn't like being told what to do by kings. Spite against authority. The internet? Started as a military project, but really took off when people realized they could argue with strangers about everything. High Economist Krill's eye stalks swivel with excitement. And your greatest technological achievements? The moon landing was mostly about beating the Soviets. The printing press revolutionized society because people wanted to argue about religion more efficiently. The Industrial Revolution happened because everyone wanted to prove they could build better stuff than their neighbors. All spite-driven, the three aliens say in unison. I slump in my chair. Are you telling me that human civilization is basically built on our collective ability to get annoyed and then prove people wrong out of pure stubbornness? Yes, Minister Zephon says. And it is the most terrifying thing we have ever encountered. Terrifying? Commander Vextar leans forward. Ambassador Morrison, do you understand what happens when a species discovers faster than light travel purely because they want to prove their neighbors wrong about whether it's possible? They achieve faster than light travel? They achieve faster than light travel out of spite. Do you comprehend the implications? Most species develop interstellar capabilities through careful scientific advancement over millennia. They plan, they research, they proceed cautiously. But humans? Humans will dedicate centuries to proving a point that nobody asked them to prove, simply because someone once suggested they couldn't do it. Economist Krill's bubbling becomes almost frantic. The economic implications alone are staggering. A species that will revolutionize entire industries out of personal pique. That will reshape galactic trade routes because someone implied their products weren't good enough. The market disruption potential is incalculable. And, politically, Minister Zephon adds, imagine negotiating with a species that takes everything personally and remembers every slight for generations. Most diplomatic conflicts are resolved through compromise and mutual benefit. But how do you compromise with beings who view disagreement as a personal attack and respond by trying to prove their opponents wrong about everything? I'm starting to get a sinking feeling. So humanity's reputation in the galaxy is basically that we're vindictive, petty, and impossible to work with. No, Commander Vextar says. Humanity's reputation is that you are vindictive, petty, impossible to work with, and absolutely unstoppable once you decide to prove a point. The reports we received, Minister Zephon continues, described entire trade negotiations being revolutionized because human representatives took offense at standard diplomatic language. Military alliances formed because humans were insulted by suggestions that their technology was inferior. Scientific breakthroughs achieved because researchers were personally annoyed by theoretical limitations. You're describing us like we're some kind of galactic menace. You are, all three aliens say simultaneously. But High Economist Krill adds quickly, you are also the most effective problem solvers we have ever encountered. When properly motivated by personal offense, humans can accomplish things that other species consider impossible. The question, Commander Vextar says, is whether the Galactic Council is prepared to deal with a species that views every diplomatic interaction as a potential personal insult and responds to criticism by revolutionizing entire sectors of civilization out of spite. I look around at the three aliens, all of whom are now watching me with a mixture of fascination and concern. So what happens now? Minister Zephon spreads his impressive wings. Now, Ambassador Morrison, we vote on whether to grant humanity membership in the Galactic Council. And we pray to our respective deities that you never take anything we do personally. The vote, as it turns out, is unanimous. Not because the Galactic Council is impressed by humanity's achievements, mind you, but because they're absolutely terrified of what we might do if they reject us. The motion passes. Minister Zephon announces, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has just made a decision he's not entirely sure about. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities therein. Wait, I say, that's it? No ceremony, no speeches about interstellar cooperation and shared destiny? Commander Vextar's horns gleam as he shakes his massive head. Ambassador Morrison, we are not going to risk providing you with additional material to take offense at. This is the most diplomatically neutral membership acceptance in Council history. Wow. Thanks for the enthusiasm. See? High Economist Krill's eye stalks swivel toward the others. He is already finding ways to be insulted by our acceptance. This species is going to revolutionize galactic politics through sheer pettiness. And you know what? He's not wrong. Over the following months, humanity's integration into the Galactic Council goes about as well as you'd expect. Within weeks, human diplomats have accidentally insulted 14 different species, started 3 trade wars over what everyone else considered minor procedural disagreements, and somehow convinced the entire Outer Rim Alliance to completely restructure their government because a human ambassador took offense at their voting procedures and spent 6 hours explaining why they were doing democracy wrong. The Kytherian Empire, stung by my comments about their military capabilities, launched a massive military modernization program just to prove they could still fight. They're now the most effective fighting force in 3 sectors, entirely because they were annoyed by some human pointing out their weaknesses. The Mollusk Trade Federation, embarrassed by the coffee revelation, pivoted to legitimate economic development and became the galaxy's most successful microcredit lending organization. Turns out, spite is a powerful motivator for ethical business practices. And Minister Zephon? He used his 2,000 years of experience to streamline council procedures so efficiently that diplomatic negotiations that used to take months now wrap up in days. All because he got tired of being called a bureaucratic dinosaur. As for me, well, I'm still Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, mostly because everyone's too afraid to replace me. Apparently, there's some concern that bringing in a new human diplomat might result in them taking offense at something entirely different and launching humanity into a completely new direction of spite-driven innovation. Earth's government tried to recall me once, figuring they should send someone with actual diplomatic training. The Galactic Council politely requested that I remain in my position indefinitely. When Earth asked why, they received a formal statement explaining that while my diplomatic style was highly unconventional, it had resulted in more positive political and economic changes in 6 months than the previous century of traditional diplomacy. The real kicker? Humanity is now considered one of the most influential species in the galaxy, not because we're particularly smart or strong or technologically advanced, but because everyone is constantly trying to avoid accidentally offending us and triggering another bout of spite-driven civilization advancement. We've got species falling over themselves to make sure their trade agreements are fair, their military alliances are respectful, and their diplomatic language is appropriately considerate. Not out of genuine respect, mind you, but out of genuine terror that saying the wrong thing might result in humans taking it personally and spending the next century proving them wrong about everything. And the funniest part? We don't even do it on purpose. We just genuinely can't help ourselves when it comes to taking things personally and turning minor disagreements into crusades for vindication. So there you have it. Humanity's great contribution to galactic civilization isn't wisdom or compassion or technological innovation. It's our unparalleled ability to get our feelings hurt, and then channel that hurt into stubborn, persistent, absolutely petty determination to prove everyone wrong about everything. They say the real treasure is the friends we made along the way. But honestly, I think the real treasure is the grudges we held along the way, and the incredible things we accomplished just to prove we were right about them. After all, spite may not be the most noble of human motivations, but it's certainly one of the most effective. And in a galaxy full of logical, reasonable, diplomatic species, sometimes what you really need is someone petty enough to take things personally and stubborn enough to do something about it. Welcome to humanity's golden age of galactic influence, powered entirely by our inability to let things go and our desperate need to prove points that nobody asked us to prove. It's probably not the future we dreamed of, but it's definitely the future we deserved.